Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We're doing it live and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons, right after Guy Benson at 3 and, Randy Wang at 5 on the 790 KBC News Blitz. Right now it's Mottek On Money live on the air right now, 790 KBC. Streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KBC.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all your favorite podcast platforms. A welcome break from the stock market's roller coaster ride today. That's because major financial markets were closed today for Good Friday ahead of the Passover and Easter holiday weekend. Didn't hear too much about tariffs today, but we are hearing that President Trump and his team are studying the option of removing Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, according to the National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett today. We're following that story closely. This after President Trump yesterday took aim at the Fed chairman in a social media post, writing that the Fed should be cutting interest rates, adding that his termination cannot come fast enough, according to the president's comments on Truth Social. Of course, this is a big story that we're following here in the financial markets. In a speech on Wednesday, actually an exchange at an economic forum on Wednesday, the Fed chairman warned the Trump administration's trade war could result in a combination of higher inflation and slower growth, something called stagflation. President Trump and his team studying the option of removing the Fed chairman. That's the latest headline coming out of Washington today. Also, we're watching what's happening with the stock market, of course, closing out the week yesterday, the final session of the trading week ahead of the long Easter holiday weekend. We did see the Dow come in for a closing loss of 527 points yesterday. The S&P 500 ended up by 7, and the NASDAQ closed down 21 points. Mixed finish to close out the holiday shortened week. And for the week, the major averages did dip for the week, coming off of last week's gains, thanks to that big pop we saw midweek last week, in which the Dow moved up nearly 3,000 points in one day when President Trump paused the tariffs for 90 days, some of the tariffs anyway. The yield on the 10-year note is back to 4.33%. This after the European Central Bank delivered an interest rate cut yesterday and made clear more are likely on the way. This after the Fed chairman signaled U.S. Fed policymakers are in no hurry to resume easing monetary policy. Price of gold in all this hitting record highs this past week, blowing past $3,300 an ounce. Right now hovering at around $3,328 an ounce at last check. Oil also got a pop as the dollar slipped overseas. Right now oil hovering just below $65 a barrel. The U.S. exerting maximum pressure on Iran to drop its nuclear program. The talks on the nuclear program resume tomorrow. How is the tariff back and forth impacting small businesses? I talked about that earlier this week with one of the top people at the National Federation for Independent Business in Washington. Today we'll bring it home and talk to small business owner Tara RICEBERG, owner of the Tesoro gift shop in Beverly Hills. And heading into the Passover Easter holiday weekend, wine will be part of the holiday observances, dinners, and parties, including wines from the Holy Land, getting new attention this year. And yes, tariffs are also a concern in the wine business worldwide. I'll discuss that and more with wine expert Michael John Young, who will be joining me live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, tariffs, and the whole works now, as well as the epic firestorm reconstruction effort happening here in the Los Angeles area, in the Pacific Palisades, and in Altadena in the San Gabriel Valley. Joining us live now, prominent Los Angeles-based economist Kevin KLOWDEN at the Milken Institute. He's executive director at Milken Institute Finance and getting set to moderate discussions at the Milken Institute Global Conference coming up next month. Kevin KLOWDEN, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank.
So much going on in the
happy Good Friday.
Happy Passover, happy Easter weekend to you and everyone there. Thank you very much for that, and thanks for taking the call today ahead of the holiday weekend, and certainly a lot to unpack here as the markets take a pause. Give us your assessment here of what's been happening lately in the financial markets in reaction to all this tariffs back and forth.
Well, right now the financial markets are essentially, the best way of saying is that they're hoping and praying for stability. They had a tremendous level of relief that you saw, you mentioned earlier, in terms of the rebound in stocks that happened when the tariffs were paused. At the same time, they're very much looking for circumstances, whether it is in tariffs, whether it is in monetary policy, whether it is in terms of investment and other activities, where they know what's coming next. And one of the real issues that's happening right now is that all of these companies have these intense global supply chains. And one of the things that the administration did that gave a pause to the markets and gave some relief was temporarily pausing tariffs from China on computers and on telephones. But at the same time as they said that, you also heard a remark from the Secretary of Commerce that they are only pausing those, that they're going to introduce tariffs on semiconductors and other component mechanisms. So don't even expect computers and phones to remain immune from these tariffs for long.
On there live with economist Kevin KLOWDEN, and of course, had a flashback to the days when we were on there every week during the COVID days and the bear market we saw back then, and of course the entire global economy shut down. We haven't seen market moves like that since those days, with triple-digit, even four-digit moves in the Dow almost on a daily basis here. We heard from the Fed chairman in that economic forum that he talked about the situation with interest rates and the Fed mandate on jobs and inflation, and now President Trump locking horns with the Fed chairman. This is throwing another wrinkle that the financial markets are watching closely. What's your reaction to this new drama that's playing out?
Well, this isn't really a new drama. This is, in fact, a drama in some ways that goes back to the time when President Trump was in his first term, because one of the things that he has been particularly focused on consistently is the idea that low interest rates lead to business growth. This is a mantra that he has stated multiple times. He comes from a background of real estate, low interest rates, and loose monetary policy is something that benefits real estate tremendously. So from his perspective and, in his business experience, this is something that he holds very strongly. The catch is that he's also facing the consequences of the tariffs. And for Chairman Powell, he's stuck in a bind because even as Europe is lowering interest rates because it feels that even with some of the tariffs from the U.S. and inflationary pressures are not as strong within Europe and not as strong coming from, potential deals with China and elsewhere. The U.S., because the tariffs were raised universally at 10%, and because the threat is there not only in the Chinese supply chains, otherwise, there's a lot more pressures going on in the U.S. And so for Powell, where he's, is you mentioned, concerned about the idea of stagflation, that's something that definitely lends itself to higher interest rates. If anyone remembers back in the days of President Reagan, when Paul Volcker was Fed chair, he actually was willing to raise interest rates tremendously, way beyond anything that we've experienced now, to try and stop stagflation, which is something that actually was one of the reasons that President Carter didn't get reelected.
Looks like Powell's term is set to expire next year. And as I mentioned at the beginning here, according to the National Economic Council director at the White House, Kevin Hassett, the president and his team are studying the option of removing the Fed chairman, Powell, following the president's tweet on Truth Social this past week. According to Supreme Court rulings, back in the 1930s, you probably could educate us more so than I can. It looks like that would be an uphill fight, right? For the president to remove the Fed chairman. Is that even possible?
Well, here's what it comes down to: is that as you said, it's a ruling from the 1930s. The Supreme Court has shown that they're willing to disregard precedent up to a certain point, and have done so. So that always opens the door for the idea that they could revisit this. The main concern on this is, first off, is this something that the president wants to fight? Because it will take a while. Trying to do this is not going to be something simple as just firing the Fed chair and then pushing it through. They're going to want to make this decisive. They're going to know that the Supreme Court will back them. And to do otherwise creates even more uncertainty in the market, because it's one thing if the Fed chair is removed, which is something the markets don't particularly like, even when they don't particularly love the Fed chair. But again, it's that uncertainty. So expect the White House to want to be completely certain about what their move is before they do so. But even then, even if they don't do this move, part of this is the president positioning himself and showing his displeasure, especially as he sees Europe lowering interest rates when the U.S. does not.
Zooming out now to the bigger picture, in all this, a lot of discussions about the possibility of a recession this year and what all this will do, what the tariffs will do to the economy, as well as inflation. Can you give us your assessment of the best you can at this point?
Well, right now we don't know. On a recession, it's one of those things where, unfortunately, it takes the data a while to unfold. What we do see, however, is the tremendous pressures that are going on in numerous different sectors, not just because of the tariffs in China, but also the tariffs on raw goods. And we're obviously feeling that here in Southern California, as you mentioned about the fires and rebuilding efforts. But we see this in construction. We see this in everything, even in terms of steel production and in aircraft production and so on, where the various raw materials and the various issues and disruptions is making it more expensive and harder. And expect those pressures to come out and be reflected not only in the jobs market, but also in consumer confidence, which has been definitely on the decline, and in some other areas such as tourism, which the numbers that have been coming back right now are suggesting as much as $90 billion being cut from the tourism industry in the United States. And that will also have an effect and potentially push some parts of the country, which we might think more resilient, that are very tourism dependent, in push them more towards a recession, even if we don't necessarily see it nationally.
On the air live with economist Kevin KLOWDEN at the Milken Institute, and you're also an expert on the Southern California economy. And given this unprecedented situation here with the fire disaster, the slow rebuilding effort continues. And we did see Rick Caruso with Mayor Bass last week, and head of the LA Lakers. Also a lot of public-private partnerships coming together here. And in fact, Rick Caruso was on this program exactly a week ago today to talk about the rebuilding efforts. How do you see this effort going, and how it's playing out?
Well, I see a tremendous amount of public support coming from various leaders, foundation leaders, CEOs. There is not been an issue in California, really in Southern California, especially going back to the aftermath of the Rodney King riots, where there's been a very public sense of a need to act and to do. The problem is that we're doing so in an environment right now where California is not getting FEMA funding from the federal government anytime soon, in part because FEMA funding just isn't being doled out. It isn't being allocated quickly in any measure, especially if FEMA itself is currently under scrutiny as to whether or not it survives in its form, or whether another organization within the government does it. That's a problem. We mentioned already the issue of building materials costs, which is definitely an issue. And we also have the issue in terms of managing the insurance payouts and managing reconstruction in a way, because numerous homes that were wiped out in the Palisades, a number of them, and in Altadena even more so, were ones that were grandfathered in under old building codes. They were ones that had been around for decades or more. And trying to rebuild those homes in a way that is both insurable and also in any way representative of the kind of homes that were lost is a real challenge. And that's something that everybody is trying to navigate. We all want to see these communities restored as quickly as possible, but there are numerous different, many ways unprecedented hurdles that we're looking at in trying to find a way through. And if we bypass too many of the regulations or restrictions, then, as I said, you can't insure them. The insurance companies just simply look at them and say, we can't cover these. And if you do that, then people functionally can't afford to rebuild and can't afford to live in those places.
On there live with Kevin Clouden, economist at the Milken Institute. You mentioned 1992, and then, of course, there was 1994 following the Northridge earthquake when Mayor Richard J. Reardon was in office and led the recovery back in those days, along with Governor Wilson, right, and the state OES. We heard about them every 5 minutes on the air during the recovery when the freeways were rebuilt and so on and so forth. What's it going to take to re-energize, you think, this effort, this rebuilding effort in Altadena as well as in the Palisades?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the 94 earthquake because you're right. The intervention that happened between the state and local governments and the collaboration there was amazing to watch just how quickly the Santa Monica Freeway was reopened, in particular, after seeing that chunk dramatically crash down. And the catch is right now is that it's not just enough of having this collaboration at the state and local level. The federal government was very much willing and an active participant in 92 and in 94 to step in and to try pathways to create immediate action. But part of it also is that a number of the reconstruction efforts that happened in 94, as you mentioned, were really around the kind of things such as infrastructure, where there was a very clear plan, a very clear way to do it, and it was about get it done quickly. The catch we're dealing with here is that there's a huge amount of pressure to get things done quickly, but at the same time, because it's very heavily private sector side and very heavily about restoring the communities, there are a lot more steps involved, and that hopefully everybody isn't going to fight, that they are all going to say, this is our immediate goal, and get a number of the procedural things removed so that we can have this action happen. And not just happen now, but happen for the next 6 months, the next year, the next few years, as long as it takes to get all of this rebuilding done.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Get timeless inspiration from the very best of the Sean Ryan Show.
What do you think of working with the SEALs? We went out every night going after bad guys. I was humbled.
There was no going back home.
I would be in another room crying because I was afraid to go to sleep because of what was coming for me in the middle of the night.
How long did it take you to be able to talk about it?
A long time. But I realized my experiences may help other people too.
The men like yourself are considered legends in the community.
You're right.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
A lot to talk about coming up here soon at the Milken Institute Global Conference, which you'll be organizing as well as moderating many of the discussions there. Tell us what you and your team have planned for the discussions this year. It's obviously going to be it's going to be bigger than ever, obviously, and certainly probably more than ever to talk about this time around.
Well, there's a huge amount going on, and obviously the role of the United States in the world stage and the world economy is going to take a great deal of attention. It's going to impact all sorts of different discussions, ranging from dealing with refugee and humanitarian crises overseas, dealing with the issues of trade, of course. We're going to have the Treasury Secretary Bessent, who will be one of the first people opening the conference and talking about the economy and what the White House is intending to do and where it intends to lead. We're going to have people like Chef Jose Andres talking about humanitarian efforts and feeding and dealing with people in disasters in the wake of increasing not only climate issues, but also political issues and various unrest happening in lots of different areas. There's so many different things going on that it's hard to even just take a snapshot into one particular issue. I, for example, am going to be, among other things, leading a discussion looking at the state of the entertainment industry and retaining film production here in California, because even with everything going on, it's worth remembering the fact that film production here in Southern California has not really recovered. In fact, has even continued to decline in the aftermath not only of the strike and the pandemic. And what can we do for that in terms of the local economy, as well as, of course, dealing with issues of resiliency and rebuilding and the numerous other challenges we're facing.
Kevin KLOWDEN, thank you very much for taking the call here today, and look forward to seeing you at the conference and speaking with you on the air as we follow all of this very, very closely with you. Thank you very much, and certainly on the film business here, that's a very, very big story, and we did get the latest readings this past week, and certainly disappointing the number of productions and so forth declining once again, so we'll follow that with you as well. That is economist Kevin KLOWDEN at the Milken Institute in Santa Monica, executive director at Milken Institute Finance. We wish you and everyone there a good holiday weekend, Kevin, and thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
My pleasure, and happy Easter, happy Passover, and a good weekend to everyone.
Thank you very much, and let's get out to the freeways now. A lot of people are hitting the road. Let's check things out now here on 790 KABC.
Tomorrow,
LA County Fair is back, celebrating its 103rd anniversary, May 2nd through the 26th. Don't miss the LA County Fair concert series. Tickets are on sale at lacountyfair.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. That's 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to see Chris Young on Sunday, May 11th. If you are caller number 9, call right now, 1-888-790-5222. The tickets furnished by the LA County Fair. Stock market closed today ahead of the Passover Easter holiday weekend. It's Good Friday today. The market wrapped up the trading week yesterday with a mixed finish. The Dow down 527, the S&P 500 up 7, the NASDAQ down 21. For the week, the Dow was down 2.7%, the S&P 500 down 1.5%, and the NASDAQ dropped 2.6% for the week. And now the latest news on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. How's all this tariff back and forth impacting small businesses, small business owners? We're hearing, getting concerned that the cost of President Trump's tariffs on imports could impact bottom lines and might end up having to close a lot of small businesses, small business owners, concerning that the tariff situation adds to the economic uncertainty. And talked about that earlier this week. One of the top people at the National Federation for Independent Business in Washington on this program. If you want to review it, you can bring up the Mottek On Money podcast from earlier this week. Let's bring it home now and talk to small business owner Tara RICEBERG, the owner of the Tesoro gift shop in Beverly Hills, a gem in the heart of Beverly Hills. She's also very active in the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce. Tara RICEBERG, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Hi, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to have you with us. We wish everyone there a happy Passover and happy Easter holiday weekend. Give us your view of things here. How the this tariff drama impacting your business there?
Drama is the perfect word to describe it. Just the other week, I posted checking my email to find out that a vendor from France was refusing to ship to the United States. And I had a bit of a breakdown insisting that I will pay whatever the tariff is. Please just ship. I have customers expecting product. Just get it to me. And then, 5 hours later, there was no drama because the tariff was lifted. So it's chaotic. I don't start thinking about my Christmas buy until about July. I am hearing from vendors, from manufacturers, they are not going to be printing Q4 books. There will be no new books for Christmas time. So all those new authors releasing new books in October, their books are not going into print. I was just talking to a manufacturer of stuffed animals. Over 80% of all toys in the United States comes from China. And I was just talking to my vendor to see what he's doing about the tariffs. And he basically is just going to pass the 145% fee directly on to me as a surcharge. So the $5 item that he manufactures will be hit with a $7.25 tariff. When I get my invoice, I'm paying $10 for the stuffed animal plus the $7.25. So the $22 stuffed animal retail will now be approaching almost $30 retail.
Wow.
And it's crazy because the perceived value of a 4-inch stuffed animal is not $30. To make this make sense, if you're giving your dog a dog toy that normally costs you $15 or $18, you are now going to see that price at $25. There is no way a manufacturer of dog toys is going to be able to stay in business because the perceived value of his product is not at that price point. So things are scary. I asked my friend at the toy manufacturing, his mother has had the company for 40 years. She owns her plant in China. He is going to continue to manufacture, but he's looking to Canada to warehouse his product. That way he can at least get over the water and he won't be hit with the tariff until he actually releases product over the border. So it's kind of crazy. Everybody, my least favorite word is pivoting, trying to figure out how to navigate what's going to be happening for Christmas time.
Wow, pivoting. We haven't heard that word that much since the pandemic days. Now, of course, uncertainty. We hear that every few minutes. And of course, tariffs. Very interesting. Thank you for describing that situation, which I'm sure other small business people in this area are also dealing with. I'm sure anecdotally you've heard similar stories there among your neighbors there at the Chamber.
All we do is talk about tariffs. Everybody is challenged. When you think about trickle down, it's not just the product, it's the cardboard box to ship the product to me that is now going to be more expensive. It's going to be more expensive for me to ship product to my customers. Every bit, the cellophane, I have a pre-wrapped gift store, so every item in my store is beautifully gift wrapped with cellophane and paper, and the cellophane protects the paper from getting torn. Pre-COVID, I paid $45 a roll. During COVID, the price went to $175 a roll. My head is spinning how much that cellophane is going to cost now at 145%. So now my question is, do I start, overbuying my supplies to anticipate the usage at Christmas time when I won't be able to afford cellophane in December?
What's up, everyone? It's Trevor Sikkema here from the PFF NFL Show, here to get you ready for the 2025 NFL Draft. We're dropping PFF podcast episodes 3 times a week with the rankings, sleepers, team fits, mock drafts, and more, powered by the same data used by all 32 NFL teams. If you want a deeper insight into this year's class and how it all shapes up on draft day, we've got you covered. Become a smarter draft fan right now on the PFF NFL Podcast. The PFF NFL Podcast, part of the Believe Network. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
So even my cash flow, I'm questioning how to budget to operate my business before the Christmas rush.
And then, of course, the other big question is how does this? What kind of price are we going to see on the stickers? Then ultimately to the consumer, obviously restaurants and small businesses, big businesses, all having to make these calculations. What will the consumer bear in all of this? Have you thought about that?
Well, it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody from the Wallace, and after performances, they host, drinks and snacks after the show. And now they're looking at their budgets because the packaging for food, the plastic cups that they use, the napkins, everything is going to increase. They're not sure how they're supposed to budget for entertaining their guests at the performances. It really impacts every single business, every single person. It's pretty much devastating. And even for my business and the product mix and how I source, a lot of people suggest that I should just buy handmade in America. Well, that's great until you realize there's an 8 to 12 week lead for an artist to make something, and then they're still going to be hit with, what is the cost of supplies, the clay for the ceramics, the glass for their bowls, shipping costs, operational costs. There is no easy solution other than we need to reach out and demand some support and roll back on these tariffs. None of us are going to survive this, and it's going to kill small business. I keep encouraging people to shop small and shop local as much as possible.
Wow. Well, we certainly stand tall for small here on this program, so thanks for getting the word out about that. And I was just going to ask you whether you are looking to domestic sources for your items there, and this, of course, is the big idea here to bring manufacturing and business back to America.
100%. The reality is we cannot produce toys and retail them for $9.99. we don't have the ability to manufacture and meet the demands that are being placed upon us. I've always looked for shopping local. I always look actually for, international products. Amazon is a big problem for me. So I've always tried to look for other resources. Luxury for me is having something that nobody else has. So I really lean into products from Europe and things that are handmade by local studios and local artists here in America. My biggest concern for them is not being able to get their raw materials at an affordable price.
Well, Tara, thank you very much for sharing that with us here. We'll stay in touch with you and follow this drama with you. We certainly wish you all the best and hope you have a very successful holiday weekend over this Passover Easter holiday weekend. A beautiful gift shop in Beverly Hills, the Tesoro Gift Shop in Beverly Hills. Tara RICEBERG, the owner of the shop, also very active in the Beverly Hills Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very, very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the time and getting the word out. Really appreciate you, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure. And let's get out to the freeways now on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues. 790 KABC heading into the Passover Easter holiday weekend. Wine will be part of the holiday observances, dinners, and parties, including wines from the Holy Land getting new attention this year. And yes, tariffs are also a concern in the wine business worldwide after we heard Tara RICEBERG give that compelling description about how tariffs are impacting businesses here in the Los Angeles area. Joining us live now is Michael John Young with Skurnik Wines and Spirits here in Los Angeles, which includes Yarden wine from the Golan Heights, among others. Michael John Young, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
No, my pleasure, Frank. Great to be with you again.
Wonderful to speak with you, and so it's becoming one of my favorite subjects here now. I've suddenly developed an immense thirst after our last conversation recently. So tell us about the wines from the Golan Heights and what's happening this holiday weekend.
Well, that's a terrific subject. It was a pleasure to meet you and to spend some time breaking bread over at Spago for the Passover Seder, where we were lucky to be a participant, pouring Yarden and then another wine that fits into the Golan Heights Winery's portfolio called Hermon. But wine has been made, as we know, from Israel and from the Holy Land for thousands of years. A few years ago, I had the pleasure to work with a winery by the name of Recanati, which was featured in the New York Times. They had actually found a varietal called Marawi, which the New York Times wrote a long article about how it was even the wine that was drank at the time of Jesus, and even a little bit before. But the Golan Heights Winery, they make wine not only from the Golan Heights, but also from Galilee. So it's particularly fitting at this time of year when we're celebrating the holidays.
Very interesting. Tell us more about those choices and for those that want to connect with those times.
Yeah, so Golan Heights Winery, they make Cabernet, they make Chardonnay, they make Sauvignon Blanc, all the varietals that we're familiar with in California. They do a few varietals particular to the Middle East, but for the most part, they're actually producing the French varietals that we're very used to, and it's a great alternative. The wines retail anywhere from about $19.99 upwards, up even to about $99.99, and they're available at Total Wine. Total Wine also will have also an extensive selection of wines, not only from Israel but also from Lebanon. I had the pleasure last week with working with a winery by the name of Messiah from the Bekaa Valley. A lot of us that are in the wine community are very familiar with Chateau Mouzar, which is a winery that's gotten fame kind of on level of some of the great Bordeaux houses. But Messiah is producing wines, also Rhone-style wines, very similar to the Chateauneuf de Pape's, and some of the wines that we'll see in Santa Barbara County, but they're actually coming from the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. And not only are they incredible wines, but they're fantastic values as well.
That is very, very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that. And since you mentioned prices, we just heard some real interesting things related to tariffs from our previous guest. And certainly tariffs must be part of the discussion in the wine business these days as well. Any updates on how this is playing out in the wine world?
Absolutely. I know that myself and my company, we are We're reserved right now. We're just kind of standing and watching and seeing what's going on and positioning ourselves in case there is a 25% tariff coming from most countries. And then we're also flexible that if the tariffs do decrease, that we're able to position ourselves price-wise strategically. I'm personally very hopeful, especially seeing the president of Italy, Meloni, and her visit, and it seems like it went very well. I'm particularly very fond of her, and I have a lot of faith in her and her relationship with the White House. So I'm optimistic. The great news is that we are in California, and we have amazing wineries in California that are not going to be subject to the tariffs. There's several wineries that I've discovered that are kind of new to me. Bedrock being one of them, by Morgan Twain Peterson, who's making incredible old heritage wines. Some of the vines are up to 100 years old. A buddy of mine is making wines in Paso called Alexander, Aleksander. He actually used to play for the Lakers. His name's Sasha Vujicic. And his family, he brought his family here from Slovenia to make wine. And he's making incredible wines that, you know, we're lucky that those wines are not going to see any tariffs. So they're kind of safe bets and alternatives that we can enjoy during the holidays and know that they're reliable for price.
That's wonderful, and appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. And any other trends you're picking up in the wine world these days? What are people clamoring for nowadays?
You know, I just sat down in a tasting, and we were comparing different Sangiovese grapes from Italy. They wanted to taste a couple different sources, so we did a Brunello, which is obviously from Sangiovese. It's from a clone of Sangiovese called Sangiovese Grosso. We were also tasting a Vino Nobile, which is also a fantastic undiscovered wine, also from Tuscany. And then we had an old Chianti. So those are kind of the old reliables. They're classic varietals made from classic grapes. Those never go out of fashion.
Beautiful, Michael. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. That is Michael John Young with the Skurnik Wines and Spirits here in Los Angeles, which includes the Yarden wine from the Golan Heights. We wish you and everyone there a happy Passover and happy Easter holiday weekend. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. I'll be back with more at 4 on Monday afternoon right here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Get timeless inspiration from the very best of the Sean Ryan Show.
What do you think of working with the SEALs? We went out every night going after bad guys. I was humbled.
There was no going back home. I would be in another room crying because I was afraid to go to sleep because of what was coming for me in the middle of the night.
How long did it take you to be able to talk about it?
A long time. But I realized my experiences may help other people too.
The men like yourself are considered legends in the community.
You're right.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.